Can you guys hear me? So a lot of people think that Bitcoin mining is this fancy, high-tech operation with folks in white coveralls and nice clean rooms, but that is the farthest thing from the truth. It is a gritty, dirty, industrial commodity-type process, not dissimilar to oil extraction, gold extraction, or other heavy manufacturing-type operations. So with us today, we've got some folks that have boots on the ground, have actually developed numerous sites. So I'd like to introduce Ray from Marathon, Matt from Giga, and Scott from Digital Shovel, fellow Canadian. My name is Kulyk. I'm here on behalf of SunnySide Digital. We work with many public companies on wholesale hardware infrastructure, and we've been on the ground since about 2017 in the space. So, Ray, kick it off with an intro.
So my name is Raymond Walintukan. I'm the SVP for mining operations for Marathon. Previously, I was with Bitmain and Bitdeer as head of operations in North America.
Howdy, my name is Matt Lohstroh. I'm the co-founder of Giga Energy. We're a Bitcoin mining operator, both in an off-grid application, so think flared natural gas, as well as on-grid. And then we are an infrastructure provider for electrical equipment, mining containers, as well as natural gas generators, all products that kind of have stemmed organically out of our own personal need for low-cost, high-quality equipment.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Scot from Digital Shovel. We're a manufacturer of electrical infrastructure and equipment for mining Bitcoin, completely vertically integrated from the raw metal material to the final panel, all in-house in Toronto, Canada.
Yeah, so we'll kick it off with a question that starts from the bottom as we go up higher. On a typical digital mining facility and operation, in your experience, what are the number of trades that you actually see on the ground? And by trades, I mean professional trades that actually have a high-value input to the construction of the facility. Scott, you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I mean, I think it really depends on whether you decide to do it all yourself or go with a solution like Matt or I make, where you try to contain a lot of those on-site costs, limit the number of trades to mainly a basic GC and then electrical contractor, or if you're going to do something where you want to fabricate it yourself. In our instance, usually there's two. It's mainly the electrical contractor, which is the primary one, make sure you have a good, and some sort of a GC to do the basic groundwork and such.
Nice.
Very similar on our end in terms of, you have the individual suppliers as it relates to the raw materials. The kind of most professional profession would be the electricians on that end. But the kind of funny thing about Bitcoin mining is, I personally welded our first 10 containers. It's not that hard. When you need something in volume at scale, that's when you kind of do have to have that professional touch on that end.
So I'd like to take a look at different approach on this. The first thing I think that you really need is a finance team. Following that, you're going to need real estate team and your power infrastructure guys that are going to look for power. Following that, you're going to need a good procurement team. You're going to need guys that know how to get miners cheap, at scale, on time. Following that, then you have engineers. I think it's very important to have like kind of a political community member, someone that works with the local government to get favorable rates, to get the community on board, to create jobs and educate the community. So, and then following that, engineers, operations, and kind of everything. And glad that you guys are here because you guys, are the ones that are providing all that infrastructure. So.
And before we move on, I mean, typical cost per megawatt, depending on jurisdiction, how does that vary in your experience between, say, North America or UAE? Like, how do you guys look at the different jurisdictions on costs?
Go ahead, Scott.
I was going to expand just quickly on one important part that he just mentioned on that Matt or I didn't touch on was having somebody politically connected in the area and making sure that you're following the regulations and you're on side. A lot of people think that they can kind of fly under the radar and just get by, and as they start to scale, they rapidly find out that there was some sort of regulation or some ordinance that didn't permit them from operating, and then they end up being months and months and sometimes a year where they're shut down when they put all this money in, spent all this infrastructure, thought they were going to be mining, and it's a year plus before they're able to get back in mining, and then they spend all that time with that equipment offline. So that's a really, really important point that he touched on there.
Yeah, there's horror stories of folks building a facility next to a school, forgetting that these things generate incredible amounts of noise if you're not done properly, and having issues with municipal bylaws and being shut down because of community opposition. So government relations is almost as important as electrical engineering, so you know the community that you're building within. Ray, go ahead.
On what?
On power, on the cost, sorry.
Oh, the power and cost,
Yeah.
right? Varies substantially. If you have a substation built out, you could save $200,000-300,000 a megawatt right there. Right?
Yeah.
If you're looking at MEPs on a building, could be $100,000 a megawatt. Immersion, you can run somewhere between $200,000 and $1 million a megawatt, depending on which provider you go with, and if the immersion works. No names. But other than that, I think if you can get an entire build-out greenfield with substation, anything under $500,000 is great. If you can piggyback on existing infrastructure, build it for $100,000 megawatt if you really can.
And so is it more of a build versus buy decision on your side, or how do you guys look at it?
It totally depends on power availability.
Right.
Absolutely. If you are lucky, for example, we built something in an aluminum smelter plant.
Oh, yes.
And that cost us pennies on the dollar. It was a rough build, but it worked, and it was cheap to build. Absolutely. But you get what you pay for. So.
Fair enough.
Yeah, to that point in getting what you pay for, it's important to try to compare apples to apples. There's a lot of solutions in the market that are definitely cheaper than what all three of us have built. Would I want to walk inside of them? Would I feel safe? Would I feel safe putting that amount of dollars into, in terms of mining equipment, into a data center that's that cheap? No. You got to think of what your overall investment is in terms of the miners that you're spending. Depending on what cost you buy the equipment at, it's going to be anywhere between 5 to 20% of your overall investment is going to be the data center side of it. Are you really want to cheap out on that part when you're spending that much money on the equipment? And more importantly, on the safety aspect of it, it's really, really important to compare those elements.
If I could piggyback on that, absolutely. I agree with you 100%. I don't know how many times we've had the spreadsheet guys determine what's going to be going into your mining farm.
Wait. You mean Excel doesn't build up the mining facility? No way.
Is there a risk formula in there that I missed?
But with the uptime, and as an operator, right, I would like our guys to be the most comfortable as possible, to have the equipment that they need and not skimp out on the build. It's kind of looking at real estate. If you have a poor very cheap real estate build, it costs way more to maintain that. You're going to lose that in the uptime, especially in the bull run. You want to have your uptime as high as possible, making as many Bitcoins as possible. And then if you can get into immersion, you can create more terahashes with infrastructure, which is going to be less than the miner itself. But, you guys can obviously go into that.
Yeah, the number, especially being in Canada, the number of horror stories and photos that I've been sent of data centers or containers that guys kind of home built or something they bought overseas, and you see pictures of them filled with snow in the winter. Just the miners completely coated. And glad you saved that $30,000 on your overall $1 million project, but was it really worth it at that point?
Yeah, and it comes down to good engineering, good understanding of the environment that you're operating in. But to touch on Raymond's point, there are some interesting technologies that are coming out. Epic Blockchain out of Toronto has a UMC board that's able to overclock and manage older generation firmware to bring it up to snuff. Guys like Rousseau, who are in the audience, are doing some interesting stuff with immersion. So there are ways to actually take older gen and keep it modern and keep it actually profitable, which is great to see. Moving on to the next question, it's how do you guys see the existing data center infrastructure evolve on usage over time? There's been a lot of discussions on AI, GPU type compute. Do you see that as a trend happening to have digital miners convert some of their infrastructure for HPC? Or is that more of a passing fad that people are putting out for press release?
It depends on the type of miner, right? Because Bitcoin miners think backwards in terms of, they look at their capital expenditure and say, how many megawatts can I get out of this?
Exactly.
When you talk to a real data center, like a tier 1, tier 3, they have all of the, DOE, compliances. You can't be using aluminum windings. You have to be using copper. So there's this massive amount of equipment. So I think the more professional ones, I think kind of there's a lot of people out there LARPing about like kind of like, they're pivoting or they're getting into it, and some do have the ability to do so, but, kind of starting at the medium voltage, you have to have certain qualifications.
Correct. Yeah.
And you can't just swap out. And so some people do have that ability, but most do not.
What do you think the percentage is offhand?
I don't know. I'd be lying if I could say.
Okay,
Yeah.
fair enough.
Well, I mean, HPC is still new.
Right.
And it costs 10 times more expensive than it is to build a Bitcoin mining farm.
Or more, yeah.
I don't know what the rate per kilowatt hour that the hosting providers are providing. I don't know if anyone knows that, but
Anywhere it doesn't. It's a completely different operating model.
it's like 14 cents maybe
yeah,
plus.
even more. Yeah.
But at least there's a longevity to that, and there's quite of a hype right now. And obviously, you see a lot of public miners trying to get into this because they're trying to chase the hype. If you weren't ahead of this before this hype started, I think it might be a little bit too late. Don't know. Could be wrong. But yeah. I mean, Scott.
I mean, I think comparing the two is like saying dirt biking versus MotoGP. Like, they're two completely different realms. Like, the form factors are different, power density is different, the expectation in terms of quality of the build and ease of serviceability and all these other factors are completely different. But yeah, we get asked all the time, can we do an HPC version of your pod? Sure, but that's not really what it's designed for. I mean,
Right.
Like you said, it looks good on a deck, looks good as a headline, but they're really two completely different industries. Like I said, comparing dirt bikes and MotoGP, both have two wheels, both have rider in the same position, but completely different dynamics.
No, I appreciate that. I mean, there was a recent press release by NVIDIA that is showing that its newest AI GPU chips are approaching power densities that are coming close to actual ASIC power densities for digital mining. As that power density increases on the HPC side, there could be some synergies for the existing infrastructure and digital miners' ability to actually manage that much thermal load, right? So totally hear you on the requirements on the electrical infrastructure side, but there are pockets where digital miners could marry HPC quite effectively as long as there's off-takers, geographic proximity, favorable political climates, because there's a lot of states, especially North America, where they're like, absolutely not if you're a Bitcoin miner, you're killing kittens. But if you're an HPC guy, please, sir, here's a red carpet, right? So it's a very different political climate for HPC versus digital mining, which is absurd in a way because we're literally doing the exact same thing. We're putting up infrastructure, managing computer hardware, and keeping stable compute for the off-takers. In our digital mining case, it's the BTC network. For HPC, it's obviously AI training models or any other off-take for GPU compute use. So appreciate your feedback on that question for sure. How has mining infrastructure changed over the past 3 to 5 years, and what are the impacts on the industry and broader industries like HPC? Do you think that some of the lessons learned on digital mining will be applicable for others, or?
I mean, really complicated question. I mean, if you look at history, which is what, 5-6 years of large-scale mining, we started with air, and
Yeah.
I mean, if you like bugs in your machines, that's the way to go, right? If you like snow in your machines, air is the way to go. But I think it's been amazing what we've seen in the last few years with immersion.
Yeah.
I think immersion is certainly the future. It's simple, easy to deploy. Yes, there's a capital expenditure, but the uptime, great. Pre-maintenance, process that you have to prevent any downtime, fantastic. For hydro, I'm going to go on here. I think we're still a little skeptical of hydro. Directed chip has been around for a while, but you have issues, all these little intricate issues. There's a pressure on each one of the water pipes, and then there's a pressure that's different on the pumps, and there's a pressure on the dry cooler, and all of that has to be balanced with the chemical balance as well as the humidity. Apparently, humidity is a huge problem with these hydro miners. If you're in a really humid environment, it's going to stick to the outside of the chips. Which becomes probably, I don't know, you guys probably run into the same issue. So I think right now, hydro's still new. Maybe that's a way to solve it, but I think immersion, we're going to see everybody going immersion.
Yeah, and I think something that's changed over time too is, the margins are tighter, right? You were at 40-cent hash price, year and a half, 2 years ago, and so the margin for failure is so much more thin, and so people are experiencing it a lot closer on that end. And just less room to fail, but over the end too, you can imagine, 2017, 2018, immersion was brand new, and everyone was screwing everything up. Everyone was paying $500 a megawatt. It was ridiculous.
Yeah.
And so I think that's come a long way since, in terms of like, most people can like, deploy an immersion setup and like not get like totally screwed on that end. And as it relates to hydro, I think as it relates for direct to chip cold plate cooling, it's best suited in a smaller application from what we've seen, is specifically why we've gone for it. Again, all of the products that we now offer are first for ourselves. And so we're operating in South America, or going to currently in Argentina and expanding in Ecuador. And we need it for those current environments. And we're in very distributed systems. And so when you get into immersion, right, in a massive, 100 megawatt plus facility, I think it's perfect because you can really achieve amazing economies of scale. And for us, hydro is kind of the route we decided to go on that specific, power dense application, with much less things as it relates to the oil field in terms of externalities.
Yeah, I agree. Immersion's awesome and definitely probably the future. However, I think you're still going to see a solid demand for air-cooled over the next couple of years, especially with the transition to the S21 and the new generation machines, because you're going to have this massive dump to the market of the current generation of the S19s, and a lot of those guys are trying to just go off, what is the cheapest, safest way I can take and build something to get some sort of ROI out of this last generation of machinery before they become obsolete. So there's definitely still an application for air-cooled, but immersion's definitely the way the future's going.
Oh, and I totally agree. I think you're in the middle of nowhere. You need to deploy something fast. Yeah. Air is the way to go. Absolutely. Yeah. You'll be up and running immediately. So, yeah, that's great. And
not only that, I mean, it depends on the value of the machines you're acquiring. I mean, if you're sitting and buying, foreshadowing here, S19s at $300, are you going to... the equipment broker here.
Hey, 3,000.
I remember buying S9s back in the day at $35, and it was a great investment at the time. And when you went and did that, you filled up a container. You were able to, build, sub $100,000 a megawatt for your data center application, and at that ratio of investment, it makes sense to go with one of the cheaper options for air-cooled, because the bump that you're going to get out of immersion isn't going to give you that, a percentage of an overall ROI increase, because it's that low of a capex in terms of the equipment. Going back to what I was saying earlier about the, the ratio you're spending on your data infrastructure versus on your miner purchase is all relative, right?
Unless you're the guy cleaning that air-cooled container from the bugs. It's like, I wish we had immersion.
At that point, they're usually running them into the ground anyway. I don't know what containers you're running. Ours have two-stage filter systems, so no bugs are getting in there.
That's good. We should take a look at your containers.
Yeah, if you don't clean your air, you get some nasty stuff in those containers and the actual boxes themselves, the systems. So my favorite question that we've got right now is, what are some trends or new technologies that you guys see coming up on the horizon that will either be field tested by your teams or something that you think will be a major game changer for digital mining infrastructure, or just generally as an ecosystem? So it's an open question, but something to either highlight or focus on.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that's kind of exciting to me is if the ASIC manufacturers can start operating at higher and higher temperatures on the chip level, that's going to be a game changer for any fluid cooling system, right? So just kind of for reference, the chip temperatures relative to ambient air is quite small, as opposed to, say, a car engine or a larger 200 Fahrenheit on that end. And so if they can get them up to higher and higher temperatures, the efficiency in terms of radiator sizing can be much more efficient. And that will have massive implications just on the cooling distribution side. And so I think that's something that I'm pretty interested in. I think it's kind of far out, but again, as Bitcoin system and manufacturing continues to evolve, that will be a natural growth.
So the temperature range of the chip operation itself.
At higher speeds.
Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, to his point, I don't fully grasp why we have this focus on trying to cram everything into this tiny space. It's like, take a look at most of the data centers we build. We're not usually limited on space that much. So the need to try to cram these tiny little heat sinks, if you expand the heat sink 150, 200%, you're going to get that much better thermal efficiency and be able to operate these chips at a higher temperature with the same ambience. So excellent point.
I'm really looking forward to next generation chips. I know we're probably going to get, 12, 15% efficiencies, but it's really creating a world of efficiencies, and it's going to make the best miners shine. That's
Right.
what's going to be interesting. Zero-sum game, obviously, halfening's coming, but I think we're really interested in the challenge to see what happens, and we can combat that with different technologies, different ways of cooling, looking forward to other ways of heat offtake, ways to make your cost of electricity come down. Greenhouse is a perfect example. I think gone are the days where we're going to see very large power providers give 200 megawatts to a Bitcoin miner. I think it's going to get much smaller. And same with power. I think power is going to get distributed. Even though there's quite a bit of build for new generation, I think power is going to be distributed to the masses, kind of like how Bitcoin was originally. Everyone's getting their own solar panels. I mean, you see what happens in California when there's a lot of brownouts. And then everyone's getting their own windmills. Why not add Bitcoin mining then? Why not add a greenhouse next to it as well? And I think we'll see that, in the next future. That's what's happening next.
Are there any instances of that you can reference that are in operation today, or is it more R&D that's going on?
Well, the thing about greenhouses is you're not going to get 100 megawatts of heat offtake into a greenhouse. You probably need something the size of, I don't know, Texas. A 1 megawatt heat offtake from an immersion can give you maybe 2 acres. 2 acres of greenhouse in a northern state, maybe Canada. But other than that, there's nothing to the large scale, but it's certainly a lot of R&D that's going on.
Yeah.
We're obviously working on R&D as well for heat offtake. Very exciting times, though. It's a way to certainly give back to the community. There's a lot of food deserts out there. Imagine you grow tropical fruit in the middle of somewhere and then give it to the local government, the local people. So yeah, it creates jobs and everything.
I mean, I'll push back a little bit on the 100, 200 megawatt bit. I mean, we have clients that are still actively developing large sites like that, and I think a lot of the energy producers are starting to realize this is kind of the reverse of creating a power plant, because if you're doing active curtailing and using that underutilized infrastructure of nuclear or hydroelectric or something that the power otherwise was being sold, or wind, for instance, where the power is being sold to the grid at nothing or negative rate environments, it's offsetting the need for creating a natural gas peaker plant that needs to rapidly turn on. I mean, if you can curtail, which a lot of producers or Bitcoin miners now can in rapid time, it is almost the equivalent of creating a new power plant without actually creating a power plant.
Which, brings, why not the power generators just go into Bitcoin mining themselves, right?
We've built 2 data centers for coal plants that did exactly that, because they can't traditionally compete in the peaker market, but now they can. They've got a baseline that they know that they're going to generate energy at their production costs of Bitcoin, and everything else is gravy above that.
Yeah, well, we hear about large power companies getting into the space, or at least kicking tires. Shell, Exxon, and Crusoe made a big announcement a while back about partnering with a major energy producer. There's been rumors that other major energy producers are actually building their own facilities. Talon Energy is partnered with the Susquehanna nuclear facility in the United States to be a major off-taker to support pulling off the excess power to make sure that the ratepayers locally actually have their electricity price dropped because they're supported by digital mining. I mean, these are the type of technology synergies, I hate to use that word, synergies, but these are the type of synergies that digital mining actually provides by being that off-taker of first resort for overcapacity, which, when you look at the variable costs, will drop costs for folks like you and me, where we're paying our utility bill every month, but we actually get a subsidy because of digital mining versus the taxpayer load, which these days we could all use a lot fewer taxes, right? Any other technologies that you guys see coming up on the horizon for digital mining? Like there's been a lot of talk on the blades for HPC being able to move into digital mining. Anything similar that you want to bring up on the panel?
Guess not.
Guess not. Okay.
Nothing public information.
Yeah, no MNPI. Although this would be a great place to disclose anything that you'd like to. So another question is, where's the commoditization of digital mining leading? I mean, we look at the oil sector, the gold sector, and all the derivative and hedging products that are available. Where do you guys see the digital mining sector going in the next 3 to 5 years?
It's a capital game. We were going back to what's the most important trade? Finance.
Yes.
And at Marathon, I'm very grateful for our team with their pedigree of how they're able to use finance, very effectively. If you're not levered up correctly, you don't have the right investors, the right capital stack, there's no way to make any money, I think, in the mining industry. It requires very creative financing and so forth. So talking about where is this leading to, commoditization, absolutely. It's becoming very, very efficient. So every little edge that you can do, whether from finance, from the tech side, from the hardware side, pool, all those add up that give you the edge. Otherwise, it's a pretty difficult field. It's so capital intensive, probably one of the most capital intensive industries that you can really get into.
I mean, to that point, Dave, the fact that the industry has evolved to the point that it is, and that it is now bankable, right? I mean, and custody solutions have been sorted out, and the metrics are something that people understand. I mean, go back to when Matt and I started in this industry, it was just hokey pokey at that point, and trying to get finance, get somebody to understand it made sense, but now you've got real viable options at conventional investment banks rather than some outlier that's going to charge you an arm and a leg, right?
Yeah, I mean, Bitcoin mining is identical to any just general commodity business, kind of outside of two things. One, there is basically no marginal cost for holding the commodity that is produced. Gold, right? You get to hold on to the gold and have physical storage of that, right? And then the other side of that is the extreme nascency that it is in the markets. And so this allows for a lot of things of people just like, no one out there, no one in any commodity just says, I'm going to hold $50 million of this commodity and sees what happens to the price. I mean, it's just not a thing. Right. And so I think people will continue to be able to get away with it, right, by building out cheap and then riding up the commodity over time. But the end place where Bitcoin mining will end up is something that's as boring as gold mining, where it grows at 1-2% a year.
Hey, I don't know if gold mining is boring. If you've ever been underground 2 kilometers,
relative to Bitcoin,
a mile underground, it's a very hot place. Trust me. To touch on Raymond's point, we recently saw J.P. Morgan initiate coverage on 4 of the public miners, which was fantastic to see. We're definitely seeing the capital markets, Wall Street, London, Frankfurt. I think Amsterdam is here as a big financial hub in Europe. Obviously Toronto. This is really an evolution of what's going on because we are extremely capital intensive. I mean, you look at our weighted cost of capital and compare it against traditional commodities, and we're still getting penalized because of how the market views our volatility, right? One thing that's still a key concern for a lot of folks, especially here at a Bitcoin conference, is over-concentration of hash rate. I know this is a little bit off topic from the infrastructure, but given we're dealing with some of the largest miners on the planet here on the panel, how do you guys view the concentration of hash rate that has apparently happened in the network, which candidly I do not believe is the case, but how do you guys look at that?
Non-issue. I mean, as an individual miner, you may have geopolitical risk wherever you're at. The Bitcoin mining network as a whole, the free market will handle it. U.S. bans Bitcoin mining, everyone will go to South America, and the game theory of relative money to be made versus just destroying your own power sources. I mean, it's just not an issue in any way, shape, or form, in my opinion. And the other question is too, right? And we still, I mean, it's always kind of the spiral cycle of like how much hash rate is enough, and getting into that.
Never
today
enough.
Probably 200 is just as good as 400, right? So we'll see, but non-issue in my opinion.
I always chuckle when people talk about the concentration geographically. I mean, it's the pools that matter. It's not really like physically where the miners are to have to worry about the concentration. I mean, if you really had a concern about concentration, it'd be a concentration of one pool that built up enough, and nobody cares where the miners are physically for that pool, right?
If you look at Antpool and Foundry combined, I mean, that should make people a little bit nervous, no?
So that's funny what Matt was saying. I mean, he's like, it's okay. He's a Texan. Texas has 46% of America's hash rate.
That's right.
So pretty impressive what Texas has done. Okay, we got a couple Texans. So I guess from our perspective, we would like to kind of diversify. I've been in the situation where, personally, I've had a farm shut down. And that's because we have local risk, state risk, and country risk. To diversify your mining operations, I think obviously that's probably the way to go. We don't know what happens. I mean, we're happy with what Texas has done for us so far. But in general, we're looking international. You never know. You don't want to have all your eggs in one basket. So I think certainly going abroad, Latin America, maybe parts of Asia, obviously Middle East is very hot right now. So there's quite a bit of opportunity. And I think it's great because we're seeing sovereign wealths actually consider this. They're looking at it from all over every different country, especially the forward-thinking ones. They're looking at Bitcoin mining as a way to solve their capital costs for their energy infrastructure. I think it's great, but obviously big players are coming in, people with a lot of money, that's where it's coming from. So, yeah.
And real quick, just push back on that. I mean, I think there's also zero risk in terms of the pool concentration. I mean, we do it all the time. Just hit a button and go to a different pool on that
That's
end.
right.
So it's really where the physical infrastructure lies, as well as like the jurisdictional risk on that end.
Yeah, there's no switching costs between pool at this point, right?
Yeah.
So it's very easy for you to be able to say, oh, I don't like Foundry, I'm going to Ampool, or Luxor, which is in the audience, or Marapool, perhaps, if you guys open it up. No, but you touched on something interesting, and that is Bitcoin mining or digital mining really is being looked at by sovereign states as a way to pay down some of their costs for heavy infrastructure on power generation, but they're also looking at a way as long-term capital preservation. I mean, people say Bitcoin's volatile. Well, if you've ever taken a look at an Argentinian peso chart, you'll realize very quickly that Bitcoin is not volatile, or Venezuela, or numerous other countries that could be G7 or part of the 20 that really experience heavy currency volatility that makes Bitcoin actually looks like a stable source of value, store of value, and that is really another driver of adoption by nation states. Bhutan has gone into the game, obviously very public. Oman, UAE is extremely supportive, obviously, with the work that you guys have been doing. But that's not it. There's a lot more going on in the space today that people just haven't been talking about because they don't want people to know. But that being said, it does start with the boots on the ground, the folks that are actually building the facilities, that are managing the facilities. So we hope you guys enjoyed the panel. Thank you for attending, and hopefully you guys enjoy the conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Miami, for the last 3 years in this amazing city. The whole world shut down, but Miami welcomed us with open arms. We want to show Bitcoin to the whole world. We are taking the conference on the road to set the stage for Bitcoin in a new city. Nashville. Bitcoin 2024 is coming to Nashville in Tennessee, a city that is known as a music and freedom city. Bitcoin 2024 in Nashville from July 25th to 27th.